Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 914B, and today's date is March 9th, 2016, and the title of the episode is NSA Chief Warns Black Energy Malware Will Bring Down the Power Grid. Let's get into the economic collapse, political, and geopolitical news. Now, we discussed many times how the U.S. government and the agencies, they need to spy on the American people. We know the USA Freedom Act allows corporations to hand over information to the government, and the government will not hold the company liable. And what we're seeing lately is that the U.S. government is holding meetings with tech firms. And we discussed this once before because they want to fight extremism. And civil rights groups, they want to be included in the closed-door meetings to keep the feds in check. And what we're seeing is that last month, American tech companies, media organizations, PR firms, and other groups, they all got together. They talked about how they can spy on the American people to fight terror, which we know is a cover story. And we're starting to see that civil rights advocacy organizations are saying, well, wait a minute. Shouldn't we have other people in these meetings to make sure that we're not spying on the everyday person? So they sent a letter to the top White House officials asking for pro-privacy voices to be included in conversation about combating violent extremism online. And they're saying they're concerned about this. Now, the White House has not answered as of yet, and we'll have to see what stance they take, or if they answer it at all. Because we know they don't want them involved. Because companies, the U.S. government, they are planning, and they've already done this in the past, to spy on every aspect of everyone's life. It has nothing to do with terrorism. It has to do with this entire system completely falling apart and crumbling. And they realize when it does crumble apart, they need to keep tabs on people who don't agree with the government, who are against the government. And we have to remember, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, they were designed specifically to speak out against the government, to keep the government in check with freedom of the press, with the right to speak out against the government of what they're doing, to say, hey, government, no, you've gone too far. You can't spy on the people. Fourth Amendment. Hey, government, if you don't back off from what you're doing and you're not working for the people, you can be and you will be replaced. All of this was designed to keep the government from doing what they're doing. And that is going after people that speak out against them. And we can see from other countries that the U.S. government is in line with, that is part of NATO. We see that they push dictatorship in their country. They stop freedom of speech, freedom of the press. And without these rights, without the Constitution, they would do the same exact thing here. Now, out in Afghanistan, we realize that the U.S., NATO, UK, they're never going to leave this area. They keep talking about it. Then we hear they're going to bring more troops in. And we see that the partially trained UK troops, they're completely a mess. The Afghan National Army is now racked with recruitment and equipment woes. There's corruption. It's absolutely awful. There was a report that was done that found the army is badly depleted. And there's a phenomenon called ghost soldiering, wherein a person is officially on active service but not actually present in the military. And we see right now that these countries in NATO, the United States, they're all making the case of why they need to stay in Afghanistan. And we have to remember, they were never leaving. They were always going to stay in this area. The only reason Obama came out at the time saying that we're going to be bringing our troops home is because President Karzai wouldn't sign the bilateral security agreement at the time, which basically allows the soldiers to stay in there and they're not held liable for what happens in the country. And once Karzai's term came up, John Kerry came in. He helped elect the person they wanted in power, and as soon as he was elected, they signed the bilateral security agreement and soldiers were allowed to stay there. And now we see everything's being ramped up once again. Now, Joe Biden is visiting Israel right now. He's meeting with Netanyahu. And it just so happens there was a terrorist attack exactly where he was, his wife was, his grandchildren were. And we can see already that this is most likely a false flag set up in Israel to blame on the Palestinians. Now, of course, Biden came out and said that he condemns the Palestinian leaders in wake of the terrorist attacks. Netanyahu is out there criticizing the Palestinian Authority for not condemning the attacks. And we can see that this is a build-up to go back into this area. And this is what they've been pushing for all along. Now, out in Iran, we understand, back on July 14th of 2015, we had the P5+1 agree to this new deal, and that was between China, France, Russia, United Kingdom, the U.S., Germany. And they signed the Nuclear Activities Agreement, and the U.S. lifted sanctions, and we knew this was not about nuclear weapons or nuclear reactors. This was about placing the dollar on the oil that Iran is selling. And Iran already notified that they are not going to do this. They're going to be using the euro, and most likely this is temporary. They'll probably move to the yuan or ruble. But the national emergency with respect to Iran was declared back in March 15th of 1995, and Obama reinstated it, and it's going to continue on beyond March 15th of 2016. So we can see nothing has really changed. They're not getting what they thought, and the prize going through Syria is to get Iran. Because remember, back in 2008, they made this entire plan to go throughout the Middle East, conquer each one of the countries, replace them with a puppet government, and they were going to end with Iran. They are still doing the same thing. The goal has not changed. Now, out in Yemen, we see things are falling apart for Saudi Arabia. The Blackwater mercenaries are a complete mess, so they're getting rid of the Blackwater mercenaries, and they're bringing in a new mercenary group called Dynacorp. And this was a contract worth $3 billion between the United Arab Emirates and Dynacorp. And they'll be going and they'll be deployed into Yemen to fight the Houthis. So the fight is on. They're just switching it up, and they're hoping that these mercenaries will do the trick. Most likely not, because the paid mercenaries are being paid to fight. The Houthis are fighting for their country, their way of life. And that always has an edge over the paid soldier. We see that Turkey is blackmailing the EU. They first wanted $3 billion. Now they're up to $6 billion to help reduce the influx of refugees to Europe. And all of this was a complete setup from the beginning. All of it was done to get all these European countries involved in Syria. They wanted the Schengen gone. They wanted each country to set up borders so they could stop the flight of capital between the countries, because the entire economic system is completely falling apart. And we see that Turkey was holding all of these refugees, and they were doing it because they needed funds. They need more funds now because their income from the Islamic State delivering oil into Turkey has dried up. We see right now that Ukrainian President Poroshenko is working with Erdogan to step up efforts to protect the Crimean Tatars in the Russian-occupied Crimea. We're starting to see a Ukraine-Turkey Black Sea axis right now, where they are looking to join forces and they want to control what's happening in the Black Sea. And we can see this is all being prepared for war. Each step they take, every military asset they move, every soldier they bring in, is all part of the same thing. And we have been seeing and tracking all of this since the beginning. Remember, I know everyone thinks that the economic collapse is going to happen tomorrow, the next day. It should have happened a couple weeks ago. But remember who's running this. Remember their plan. Remember what they want to do. They're controlling everything. They controlled it back in 1929. They're doing it again here. They will bring it down when they are ready, when they have everything into place, everything is positioned. And this is why they're taking this time from 2008 until now to get this done. And this is what we've been reporting on, so it doesn't come as a surprise. If you notice, the corporate media right now is very quiet on what's going on in Syria. About the ceasefire, about the peace deal, about how the Islamic State is being beaten there and how they're turning into the Free Syrian Army, about the air bases that are being created in Syria by the United States, how Lebanon is under a travel advisory and countries are taking out their diplomats, how the Islamic State forces are being shipped into Jordan, how there are soldiers being readied. The corporate media, the U.S. government, very, very quiet on all of this. Why? Wouldn't they be making a really big deal that there's peace in the air, there's a ceasefire? But they're staying very quiet because they're planning on something very big to happen. And they want it to be a surprise when it does. We see a watchdog group has been reporting that, well, the coalition forces over the 18 months in Iraq and Syria, they didn't kill 21 civilians. They killed 1,000 civilians. 50 times more than the coalition even admits. And this is coming from a watchdog report which was issued today. We see the U.S. generals are out there saying that Libya is a failed state. And of course, Iran is a long-term threat. The U.S. is currently engaged right now in planning and intelligence sharing with European allies for the major offensive in Libya. Now, they want a national unity government. They're pushing this idea, and if they don't get it, they're going to go in anyhow. But they rather have the unity government. Now, during this ceasefire with Syria, NATO is out there saying that while we're countering the terrorist groups, we should also provide a counter to Russia within the region because of Russian aggression. And they need a strategic counter to Russia as their aggression increases, which is completely ridiculous because Russia is in Syria at the request of President Assad to fight the terrorist group that the United States, NATO, the UK, Israel, and the coalition forces put into Syria to overthrow Assad. So they're always talking in circles because their main goal, their directive, is to start war any way they possibly can. Now, we see that the U.S., it's all over the corporate media, and whenever you see something all over the corporate media, you know this is complete propaganda. It's not the full story. They're talking about how they found the chemical weapons labs that the Islamic State was using, that they bombed it, they destroyed it. And what we can see right now is the U.S. is going in because what's happening here is the Islamic State is losing their footing in Iraq and in Syria, and the U.S. is coming in and destroying all evidence of what was happening in this area. Remember, the U.S. supports the proxy army who's been using the chemical weapons in Iraq and Syria, and now they need to cover up what is going on. We're getting reports that the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency and the Turkish Intelligence Service WIF are jointly operating together to create the secret coordination center on the Turkish-Syrian border to operate everything for this next offensive. And we're going to have to watch that situation very, very carefully. Now, CENTCOM's Austin, he is in front of the Senate Armed Services Committee, and this is Army General Lloyd Austin III. He's saying that the Islamic State is spreading across the Middle East, into Asia, into Russia, and it's basically because of Russia and what they're doing. They're completely irresponsible. And what they're really saying is that Russia is actually fighting the Islamic State, where the U.S. was actually supporting the Islamic State. So on Sunday, Kerry is going to be meeting with French, German, British, and Italian counterparts in Paris to discuss the Syrian crisis ahead of the planned peace talks in Geneva. And most likely they'll be talking about what else they're going to do to get rid of Assad. Not about peace, how they're going to approach getting rid of Assad. They'll use the Geneva talks to have him step down. They'll do whatever they possibly can to reach that goal. And remember, if the elections don't go the way they want it to go, this is when we see the major offensive. And I think at this point, as we can see from the past, as we can see how Assad and Putin are actually liberating cities, towns, and the people are coming back saying, okay, this is a good thing, and life is returning a little bit back to normal in Syria, the people are going to look at the situation and vote for the present government. It's not going to go the way the U.S. wants unless they come in or try to fix it like they've been trying to do, because they want all Syrians without proof to vote in this election. And we know why they want this to happen. Now, the Pentagon wants to try once again to equip and train the Free Syrian Army to go into Syria. Now, they did this before, and remember what they did. They trained a couple of men, and it completely failed because most of the funds and most of the training was going into the Islamic State. In Turkey, in Qatar, in Jordan. And they had them basically filter right into Syria. That whole training program was a complete distraction because their real army was the Islamic State, was Al-Qaeda, was al-Nusra. Now, we see a lot of propaganda out there where North Korea is claiming to have a miniaturized nuclear warhead. And again, this is splattered all over the corporate media and everywhere because they need this type of information out there to make everyone understand who the enemies are going to be. And when the event occurs, and I'm talking about the false flag event, occurs, you need to know that these are the countries that did it, even though it's going to be an inside job to be blamed on these countries. So they're continually making sure that everyone knows it's China, it's North Korea, it's Russia, it's Iran, it's Syria. And today we hear the NSA chief, he's come out and he's giving this warning about the black energy attack. Now remember, a couple of weeks ago, or maybe it was a month or two already, Ukraine was attacked and their power grid went down. So they confirmed it was a cyber attack. And back then I said this was a test to see if they were able to do it using malware. So this black energy malware was around since 2007, and many people have this malware at this point, but this was developed in Russia, and they're going to use it to blame on Russia. And Admiral Michael S. Rogers, the U.S. Navy Commander, U.S. Cyber Command Director, National Security Agency Chief, has made the following warnings and predictions that come from having access to the most detailed information available. And he states clearly that it's only a matter of when, not if, we're going to see a group or actor, a country, engage in destructive behavior against critical infrastructure in the United States. Remember, back when Janet Napolitano was head of DHS, when she was leaving office, she said it's not if, but when we are cyber attacked. So they're still using the same meme at this point, and we can see that he is saying that when this occurs, it will completely bring down the power grid. And he's not only concerned about the power grid, he's concerned about data theft, specifically on the financial institutions. Because he's saying, when this happens, the numbers that you see on the screen might not show the true picture of what's really happening in your account. Or the financial institutions, the numbers they're seeing might not be real. So what he's really saying is, if you see that you have $1,000 in the account, well, those $1,000 might be gone, siphoned off someplace else, but you're still being shown 1,000. So what this tells me is this has been planned, this has been tested, just like back in August of 2003, where they had the East Coast power go down. That was a test, because they wanted to see if they could do it. They used it in Ukraine, specifically Black Energy, to make sure they were able to do it there. And now they're getting prepared and ready. And they're specifically saying it's not if, when, because they know exactly when it is coming. And they're saying that this is not just the power grid, it's also going to be on the financial institutions. And this tells us that when this economy starts to really fall apart, they're going to make it look like that this group, this country, these advanced actors, they're the ones who created this mess. Now, are they going to bring the power down the entire country? Well, no, that would be kind of ridiculous, because all communication would be out. So if they do this in spots around the country, like in New York, they can do it in LA, they can do it in Dallas, maybe Chicago, some other places, but not every single place, because they need the word to get out. They need people to understand what is going on. And most likely, this next false flag will be integrated with physical attacks, because they really need to make this event look like it's nothing we've ever seen, and it is completely horrific. Because again, their plan is to bring us to war. And this is what they're planning at this point. This is where they're moving towards. Because as this economy continually falls apart, they need to have this type of an event to convince the population that it's time to go to war. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.